But welcome to how to help kids with tics and Tourette's in a time of kind of craziness, right? In a time of this rapid change. So this is something I'm really passionate about, and it's something that I know a lot of this little group particularly doesn't get a lot of support financially. They often sort of fall through the gaps, and I thought, you know, this group and how they're going with all this change that's rapidly come, and many of their coping strategies have been taken away, it made me want to jump on and get out some information and support you. So that's what I'm hoping to do today. I'm hoping to cover some of these things, but I want to welcome you as if we are at my office. We're just, you know, catching up with a bit of a catch up with a group of people, and feel comfy and relaxed. So get comfy, come through platform 9 3/4 into a different world where we look at kids a little bit differently and we learn all about them. We're going to cover some neurotypical development, so when brains are developed typically. We're going to talk about when those brains are a little bit different in tics and Tourette's, and then give you some supports on what to do. You'll probably find I spend quite a bit more time talking about the differences than you might have expected. You might be just thinking, yeah, I know a little bit about this already, or just tell me what to do. But I think it's really important to understand it, and then you'll know what more to do, okay? But sending out your questions along the way. I've had a few questions particularly about rage and the developmental processes in tics and Tourette's, and I'll definitely be covering those because they're great questions. So feel free to put your questions up straight away so I make sure I get them, or wait till the end, whatever works for you. But I want to talk to you a little bit about neurotypical brain development. So what happens when the brain is wired typically? And I've got a video there. I won't show it for you today, but you might want to watch Dan Siegel's video if you haven't seen it already, because I just think everybody needs this Brain 101. It's our foundation. And I teach this to little people who are 3-year-old nonverbal, right through to adults who are police officers who've experienced trauma. So everyone can benefit from this. Teachers love it. And it's Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain. And what he does is, I'll actually stop share so you can see my face a little bit bigger, is he has, use your hand like this, like a little brain. Imagine this is on your side here. This is your brain stem. This is your front part of your brain. This front part here is your prefrontal cortex, your PFC. I'm just going to check that there's a, I'll pop your hand down there. Your PFC, or prefrontal cortex, this is your planning, organizing and communication. It's what cave people didn't have. I also make jokes like, it makes me think of KFC, right? PFC. Cave people didn't have KFC. They didn't plan, they didn't farm, they didn't organize. They also didn't have a PFC, a prefrontal cortex. This is what makes us human. When teachers or parents are trying to tell you, you know, kids, and say like, what were you thinking? That's the part of their brain they're wondering about. They're saying, well, what was happening to your PFC right there? Okay. So that's the front part. This is our really key part for learning, isn't it? I'm going to simplify the model a little tiny bit because I'm going to give you extra information about tics and Tourette's. But when we get really mad or we get really worried, we flip our lid. We use our downstairs part of our brain, or our army, our amygdala, and that's our fight, flight and freeze, our survival part. The lid on is calm, lid off is not calm, okay? Survival part of our brain. I'm going to click back over to here. So thinking about fight, flight and freeze, I was going to do a little poll, but I won't do it because I don't know what's going on there. But have a think about, what's your stress response style? What do you tend to do? Do you fight? Do you flight? Run away? Or are you that shouty person? Or are you that freeze, stay still? And then think about, in the current circumstances of COVID-19, what's your stress response style? Because what have we all had to do? We've all had to freeze. We've all had to stop. Some shelter in place. Some not go out, not do our things that we normally do. And this can be really quite difficult to overcome our natural stress response style, which is to maybe attack, maybe to go and do something, maybe to run away. So much of the community, much of the adult world is walking around like this at the moment. Lid off, survival mode. Normally, I spend a lot of time with families and kids, and I tell them, well, you're having a false alarm. When your teacher yells at you or your mum says no, that's a false alarm. That's not actually an emergency and a need for your stress response to go off. But do you know what? Right now, it's okay. It's actually really important that we're a little bit more vigilant. It's what's making us keep safe. So I think it's really important to have that model. It's really important to understand your own stress response style so that you can understand your own, your families, your workmates, your kids, okay, and your little person with their tics or Tourette's. So what is it like? What do they tend to do when they flip their lid? This hand model also gives them a really good way of communicating, maybe if they're a freeze person, or when you're out in public and you can't say all these complex things, you can just go like this. Oh, is that what's going on? And you can understand that actually the Wi-Fi is disconnected. The PFC is not working. So stop talking. Do a different response, okay? It's going to inform the way that you respond to everything. So I think it's a really important model to understand. That's neurotypical brain. Let's talk about those little people whose brains are wired a little bit differently, which is neurodiversity. So what we understand, neurodiversity is a term that was come up with in Australia. Actually, an Australian social worker came up with it. And instead of using a deficits model, it uses a differences model. So a lot of the diagnostic manuals, and particularly for tics and Tourette's, it's a lot of things listed about what, you know, what is happening, what is not the strengths, what's not good about this, right? Versus this model says, well, it's just brains are all wired differently. Of course they are. But most importantly, it says who are the experts in this, not those people who are writing the books. It's the actual people with lived experience. So that's what I'm going to also try and do with you today, is sort of share some experiences that I've picked up from the little people that I've worked with, or from reading and learning and listening to adults and children who've had these experiences. They're the experts. You guys, if you know someone with tics and Tourette's, you're the experts. Let's find out from this world of knowledge here. So let's find out a little bit more about tics. So you might know this already, but I think it's really helpful to understand that tics are sudden, rapid, recurrent. They're non-rhythmic. I think that's really helpful when you're trying to work out, because one of the bigger questions I have from people is, I don't even know if it's a tic. He does a bit of a habit cough, or he's always doing a little squinty eyes. What is that, you know? So it's this kind of, if you think about a sneeze kind of experience, that's very much what a tic is. You can't hold it in. It's going to come out no matter what. It's involuntary. So you can suppress it, you know, with a sneeze or a yawn, you can be like, I'm going to hold it in, but it takes a lot of effort. It's involuntary. It's going to come out no matter what. They wax and they wane. So we find that there'll be periods of lots of tics and then they'll go. Some people find they really wax and wane, get really high in times of stress. Some people find there's no pattern to it whatsoever. They often change. They often start in the middle part of the body and work their way out. So a lot of kids will start with blinking or nose scrunches or little mouth movements. I find they really seem to start around here in the center of the body, and they work their way out to maybe shoulder, arms, legs, body. Children and adults often tell us that there's a sense of a temporary relief. That's often how I know whether it's a tic or whether it's something else. Is I ask, what does it feel like once you've done it? Do you feel satisfied and calm, or do you feel like just a relief, like I've got that sneeze out? That's when you know you're in the tic territory. Some examples of tics here. I'd love if anyone wants to ask any questions or pop anything in chat here about, oh, I've been wondering about this. Is this a tic? Or can you tell me a bit more about this? Let me know if I'm going too fast or if we're going okay. But some examples there, you know, we often kind of catch the ones that are the eye blinks, but some of the ones that are a bit hard to know whether they're tics are often the cough. People will say, oh, no, to me, you know, and as you know, I work as a child psychologist. I see families all the time. I'll ask them, oh, does your child have any tics? No. What about any coughs or allergies that just don't seem to go away? Oh, yes, he does this. And, oh, yeah, he does blink a little bit. And when he gets nervous, he does this. Oh, that sounds a little bit like tics, right? I'm just going to go back there. One of the things I find people don't realize is tics is sometimes even self-injurious behaviors like punching themselves or maybe hurting others, poking, pinching, tapping. Sometimes teachers don't realize that these behaviors are actually tics. So if a child has tics and Tourette's and they're also doing some of these behaviors, you might not even realize that the things you thought were misbehavior non-compliance, disobedience, they're actually tics. The sniffing one. In about it's very small percentage of children who have copralia, the swearing, compulsive swearing, about 15%. And it's really important to note that. So often that's the one that media gets a bit of focus on, or that people think of when they think of tics or Tourette's, but it's actually a very small number. So when only about 3 to 8 children per 1,000 will have a tic, and only 15% of those will have copralia, it's actually a really small number. But those numbers there look a bit small about the number of people who have tics, but actually only 2% of the population is redhead, right? It's around the 2%, but just as common. I've got a question here. And thank you. Somebody said their son has copralia. I always pronounce it wrong, but I hope that I've got that. It comes and goes, and it's much worse under stress. Thank you. And this is what we know is I'm just going to make sure I say dismiss, is that stress increases them. We need to know what increases them, which is why I'm running a free webinar now, because stress is everywhere. So these guys are going to be finding it really hard. Some of the other things that we'll find increases them is when we bring attention to them. So if the very worst thing you can do for a child with copralia is say, don't do that. That's really upsetting and that's really offensive. And what we find is those children who do have that, actually, they know that's the worst possible thing that they could say. That's why they have the compulsion to say it. That's why their brain, the naughty little part of their brain that is not firing quite right, plays up, and it throws that particular word out. Is not because they don't know that that's not the right thing to do. They absolutely know that. That's why it comes out. And I'm going to explain to you about how the brain part works there, of why that part is not naughty. So it's not the child that's naughty. It's a naughty part of the brain that's misfiring, that goes bleh. I'm going to put a bit of info out there that I know I shouldn't do it. Any other questions or comments there about tics? Big range though, right? Get lots of questions about what is a tic and what isn't a tic. And we'll hope to kind of clear that up. Somebody else says they've got, the sibling relationship. So this person has twins and they both have complex tics. I really like that you're helping me differentiate. So there's simple tics and complex tics. So complex is when a couple of things start to be together. One of them will swear at times, but describe it as feeling good in their mouth. They often say it's so satisfying. Thank you. That is really interesting. So it is about working out with them about whether that is, and it does exactly sound like a tic because it's that satisfying or relief. I would start teaching them about that word around relief, that's the feeling they're getting. Because it's an urge that builds up in their brain and it's just got to come out. So how do you know if it's not? Because a lot of parents say to me, they're swearing, maybe they're doing it on purpose, or, you know, they're coughing or they're yelling or they're tapping, maybe they're doing it on purpose, or maybe it's something else. How do we know? So these are some of the times where it might not be a tic, is particularly stimming. So I've got a video there I'd love you to watch at some point, is a video by a lady, her name is Amethyst and she's on YouTube, and she is, her YouTube channel is called Ask an Autistic, and her video there is about what is stimming. So she really describes it and it helps you understand the differences, is that it's actually calming versus, I think your little fellow would say it's not calming, but it feels satisfying because it's like, oh, I've got that out, right? It was a relief. Another question. It is difficult to differentiate between tics and Tourette's. Thank you. So this is another one. Sorry, tics and OCD. So exactly, that's another time where it might not be a tic, especially with those complex tics, when there's multiple things together. It might actually be OCD. And we'll talk about why they look so similar. How do you know? Well, I've been doing this for a long time and I often struggle. Do you know who the expert is? Remember that neurodiversity model that we're going to use? Guess who the expert is? The person who's experiencing this themselves. Ask them, hey dude, do you feel that's calming and relaxing? Do you feel it satisfying like a relief? That's a tic. Calming is stimming. Or is it OCD? Do you feel like you've got a compulsion to do it and you don't really feel a sense of relief afterwards? It's temporary, you've got to do it again. They're the person to ask. They're the kind of questions to ask, but also these are the kind of questions to ask with a professional, because it's very hard to know. It's really hard. So we tease it apart. I'm not going to play that video. So what I do think is really important to know about tics is that, as many of you who know about tics will have seen this beautiful visual, is that tics are actually just the tip of the iceberg. So they're the things that let me know. When I start talking with a family and I start hearing that there might be some of these, they don't think that's why they're there to see me. They're there to see me because of the hyperactivity or the impulsivity or the trouble at school or the learning difficulties, maybe the anxiety or the low mood. These are all the things that go along with tics. So actually the tics are just the tip of the iceberg. You've got to always look for other things. So I'm going to talk to you about the brain and understand why those things go along together. But I did just want to make special mention there. This was so I didn't forget. So back over here, there's this tiny little bit in there that says rage. I wanted to talk about neurological rage. So it really does go along with tics and Tourette's. And it's different to being angry. It's different to having a flip the lid, amygdala, fight, flight and freeze. It's different to being a lid-on tantrum. And a lid-on tantrum is an upstairs brain behavior where you sort of feel like if you just said yes, you can go and play your Xbox, you know that'd calm down, that'd be all right. If you just gave in, you know that when parents sort of say to me like, I know that he knows what he's doing. That's an upstairs brain tantrum. Respond differently. There's heaps of parenting books out there about them. Go and do that. I don't know. It's boring stuff, right? Amygdala, calming. You've got to do calming. But when it's neurological rage, it's really quite different. And the way I know it's neurological rage is when I've talked to families and they have a look on their face when they talk about the rage outbursts. That's neurological rage. It's actually because of the brain differences. You've got to respond really differently. I'd love to take any questions about neurological rage, but I'd also just wanted to flag with you that it is a brain-based, and we'll talk about how to respond to it as well. So the parts of the brain that are particularly at play in tics and Tourette's. So remember, we've got our PFC, we've got our army, we've also got the basal ganglia, bit here at the back. So the basal ganglia is things regulating things like movement, balance, and eye control. It's also involved in all the cognitive and emotional behaviors, all this one little tiny part of the brain. It's involved in rewards and punishments, reinforcements, addiction and habits. That one part of the brain. So do you know what I've just described there where I say the basal ganglia is involved in tics? What did I just describe? Back on that other screen, all the things that happen. So remember we said it moves eyes, body movement, control. That's all motor tics, vocal tics. It's also learning. Oh, that's your ADHD coming in. It's also anxiety. Right, that makes sense. So that part of the brain means that it's going to be more than just tics. The addiction and habit, that reinforcement, that once I started it, I can't stop it. That's going to be at play here. So the other parts of the brain that are particularly impacted in tics and Tourette's is the neurotransmitters. So they're the brain's chemicals and hormones, happiness hormones. So the parts that are affected there are dopamine, serotonin, and adrenaline. So they're basically your happiness hormones, your satisfied hormones, and your attention adrenaline, right? So have a think about if you've got maybe low happiness hormones, what are you going to be at play for? Depression, anxiety. If you've got low satisfied hormones, what are you going to be at risk for? Depression, anxiety, OCD. If you've got that habit of addiction and reward and like, I've got to keep doing something, but I don't feel satisfied, what's that? That's I need to keep turning the light switch on and off with OCD, right? Because I just don't feel quite satisfied until I've done it. And then I do it, I'm still not satisfied, but I'll do it again. The adrenaline, so adrenaline is what makes us feel calm. And people often don't realize this, is that kids who have ADHD, they think, oh, they must have lots of adrenaline. They're running around hyperactive. No, actually, they've got low adrenaline. And same with this brain here, low adrenaline. So what do you do if you've got low adrenaline? You're not feeling very excited? You stir up the class, you run around, you be a bit of a crazy fool. You roll around on the floor, you never sit in your chair. You flip your lid of your brother or sister or mum or dad or teacher or psychologist. You flip it on purpose because you need someone to yell at you. You need some excitement. You'll be that kid who's thrill seeking to get a little bit of healthy level of adrenaline going. So you can see why all of that means you're really primed for some other more complex issues. There's kids who are the inattentive ADHD, and obviously they're not doing all those things to stir and flip lids and get in trouble and rock and move on their chair to get adrenaline. Do you know what they do? They just give up and they just go la, 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 into their inattentive world. So you can see these parts of the brain and these neurotransmitters really prime you for a lot going on. I've put this picture here to help you understand the brain loops involved in tics and Tourette's, but I don't know if it's a bit confusing. And I just wonder if it's easy to use that hand model of the brain. You might have seen this if you've worked with psychologists before, or maybe you've done some training on tics and Tourette's, but basically the basal ganglia accidentally lets through some junk mail to the email box here. And normally the basal ganglia, this kind of loop would slow it down and say, don't say that swear word, or don't let that little eye blink out, or don't do that little twitch. But instead it gets through to the PFC. And it doesn't. The little loop comes through. So there's the loops that are not going through the right path. And I like that kind of spam junk mail example, right? You know that you're not filtering, your filter is not so good, you're getting too much through. Is that a bit useful? Does anyone have any questions or things about the brain there before we move on? Pretty good. Hopefully you're not all going, what? My head, it's hurting. So this is why, as I was saying, I'm really highlighting if there's tics or Tourette's, you're really likely to have some genetic hitchhikers, to have some friends, right? To have some friends. And I like to call them genetic hitchhikers because in Tourette's, the friends or the comorbid conditions are the rule rather than the exception. So if there is something going on with tics, there's much more likely to be something else going on as well. So 30 to 40% of kids with tics or Tourette's will be having anxiety. Whereas in the typical population, it's about 3%. It's really low. It's still there. And people often don't realize this. Kids, of course, they can get anxious. Of course, they can get depressed. So children do get depressed. And in the neurotypical population, it's more in the couple of percent. But in this group, it's 20 to 30% will get depressed. Of those kids who do get depression, of those 20 or 30%, 40 to 50% of them will have thoughts of self-harm and suicide. Really high numbers. And I want to kind of normalize that, right? Like to go, actually, we don't think that kids can think this way or say these things, but they do. Even in the neurotypical population, this happens. But particularly when those neurotransmitters are not where they need to be. And then your body is doing things that make you feel like you're out of control and you're getting in trouble for doing things. It's likely, it makes sense. It was really, I knew that self-injurious behaviours went along with tics and Tourette's, but even I was pretty surprised to read that data of around 35% of tics can actually be self-injury, so hurting themselves, and that was in a recent study. OCD co-occurrence is about 20 to 40%, which now that you understand that hand model of the brain and the basal ganglia, remember its role as satisfied, repetitive rewards, and then the neurotransmitters, it makes sense. And then if your body's doing things that are kind of a bit repetitive and ritual as well, it makes sense that you're going to have some, perhaps develop some obsessions about that and do some compulsions. So obsessions are unhelpful thought patterns Sometimes the kind of classic one people think of when they think of OCD is they think of germs, but it can also just be a just right feeling that things have got to be a certain number or a certain way or a certain order. Or they can be other unusual thoughts that sometimes children and adults do not want to share. They're really ashamed. They come with quite deep shame, but they're just intrusive thoughts. It's a type of obsession. And then they develop a compulsion that goes, well, maybe if I do this set of behaviors, my obsession will settle. And it does. Never quite enough because of that neurotransmitter of that satisfying chemical. Oh, I just skipped past that. And autism as a co-occurring. So the research sort of seemed to really vary. It was a little bit out. Some of these other ones are a bit more standard for me, but this one, some of the papers said around 4% of kids with tics will have autism, and some said up to about 22%. So it's really important to be looking for those co-occurring. And you might notice that I've got Winnie the Pooh, right? So we all know that Eeyore's got depression, Tigger's got ADHD, Piglet's got anxiety, like you know. Winnie the Pooh, I've heard some people say that he's neurotypical. I don't know. I see some eating issues there, but we'll see. So now that we know a bit about tics and Tourette's and how it must be so incredibly hard, how do we help these little people generally, let alone how do we help them in a time when everything is cancelled? When kids are in quarantine and we're at home. And this is the thing. So that basal ganglia, remember that part is about motor. This is why many kids find really calming for their tics. They don't tic when they're doing beautifully enjoyed, highly engaging activities like sport, dancing, singing, playing music. It activates that part of the brain beautifully. But what's happened lately? We had all our beautiful support strategies cancelled. So how do we support these guys? What's the parenting manual for when we've had cancelled physical activities, when we've got increased stress and anxiety? As the person was saying earlier, their child's tics really go off the charts when they're stressed or anxious. How do we do that? When it's remember I'm saying it's okay to be walking around a bit lid-flipped, right? What about when there's a time where many people are experiencing a bit of a flare-up of OCD because everyone's talking about germs? How do we parent neurodiverse kids in a pandemic? Because nobody has written this manual. So I'll often talk when I'm talking to neurodiverse families that, you know, there's a Ford manual for parenting and you're trying to follow the Ford manual. You don't have a Ford. You got a Ferrari, right? You got a fancy European model. You got a whole new different manual to collect. So it's really hard. So that's my usual analogy, but like nobody has written the Ferrari manual for in a pandemic. So what do you do when you've got to lock that Ferrari down, when you can't take it out for a spin and that's its really calming activity? How do you take care of these things? I'm going to love some tips from you guys, but these are some of mine, okay? Feel free to start sharing your tips, right? Because that's what this is about. This is us collecting our knowledge. My first thoughts are, my always advice for every child behavior, every child's strategy is nothing to do with the child. And everyone's like, what? So when kids come and meet me, the first time I meet them, I say, you know, they've been brought here for any range of different things. But I'll say, oh, you know what? It might not be you that does all the learning. It might be mum or dad or your school, or maybe your teacher, maybe your sports coach and your brother or your sister. And they're like, oh, okay. Because they're actually working, especially these little guys with their tics and Tourette's, they're working ridiculously hard. So the first thing we can do is actually stop and support them by supporting ourselves. A calm brain needs a calm brain. So if a little person is lit off, you're never going to get it lit on by coming at it like this. So fast forward to this when you're watching it and show your household, show your teachers, show the people that really, because everybody's sitting here, am I right? Have a little aha moment going, yep, I know somebody who needs to watch this part. Calm brain needs a calm brain, especially for those little guys who are having the neurological rage disorder. When they're raging, you doing this is not what they need. They need you to be calm because it's really scary and it's quite terrifying for them. It's not what they're wanting to do. So how do we get our lids on? I'd love to hear from you guys what you're doing. Chat, put something in the question and answer or in chat for me. Tell me. But I know some of the things that work for other people is things like self-care, right? Taking a few minutes whenever you can get it, watching this webinar, connecting with me. I'm going to give you some other strategies that work for both you and for your little people, but oxygen masks on first. When the plane is going down, you need to put oxygen mask on for yourself as an adult around these little people first, and take care of yourself. And literally oxygen, breathing. Breathing is our #1 strategy for getting lid on. So taking a breath, you're going to role model, and your little person's going to see that. They're going to catch your mirror neurons, because that's what happens is they catch our brains. They catch it. Oh, beautiful. Someone's given their strategy. Their little person likes eye contact, hugs, and time in. Thank you. Because so often that typical manual, that forward manual, says the opposite of that. It says go away, send them away to another room. I don't know if that does work for many little people. We developed that strategy, psychologists, some evil psychologists maybe, in the 70s with pigeons, right? It works for pigeons maybe. I don't work with little people, and it certainly doesn't work with these brains who are wired a little bit differently. Time in, or asking your little person when they are lid on, what is it that you need? How can I help you to get your lid on? But taking a breath, taking some oxygen in yourself, being a calm brain will mean that your little person will catch that, and they will also calm. Get my thoughts together there. So these are some other strategies, okay? And I'd love if anyone else wants to keep sharing theirs, because I just really value your feedback so much, and share it with the other participants how they know. So the other activities, naming it to tame it. So when we name emotions, it's really calming. The amygdala calms down. So we put people in brain scanners and we show them a fired up, angry face. The brain flips its lid. The amygdala fires up. We get them to say anger, or maybe you're feeling anxious or worried or scared. The lid goes on, the amygdala calms down. So asking yourself, which character is at play here? So have a think about it. If you know already that your little person has anxiety, and maybe this behavior is an anxiety response, or actually is it an ADHD response? Or is it rage? Is it one of those rage attacks? Respond really differently. It's going to be calming for yourself. Is it an upstairs brain behavior or a downstairs brain behavior? So if it's upstairs brain, means that the little person does still have some control. You know, when they're kind of holding it together still, they're just giving it a go. It's the stuff you see other parents deal with in shops when their kid does a little stompy foot, but not a full-blown lid flip, okay? If it's an upstairs behavior, you're going to want to respond really differently. But if it's a downstairs brain behavior, you're going to want to say, you seem really furious. You're so mad at your sister doing that. That seems so upsetting. You're having the thought, I can't believe it's happening again and it is not fair. That's going to be calming to the brain. Name the emotions to tame it. Name it to tame it. I also think with these little guys who've got these co-occurring conditions, having a think at who's at the party. I often think of, you know, Christopher Robin has a birthday party and they all sit around the table. It's really good to kind of know who's at my table right now. Is this maybe an Aspie thing? Is it an ADHD thing? If you know those things, raise it with your colleagues or your specialist team. If you're not sure, get some help, right? We're going to get to that in a minute. Some other, so now that you've worked out some of those calming, name it to tame it strategies, the other things you've got to do is, it's really downstairs brain first. So now that you're calm, you've had your drink of water, you've said, actually, I'm going to take 20 minutes to walk away. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to put some water on my face. Do your downstairs brain strategies with your little people. Biggest tip is do environmental changes first. So what can you do in the environment? If there's siblings around, move the siblings. Come outside, dude. Let's go outside. That's rough. Let's go. Do an environmental change. I've talked about breathing. Using visuals rather than too much talking, because the internet's disconnected. The lid is not on. And using movement, right, to calm and regulate. This is what we've got to do to get our downstairs brain going. Even for a sneaky breathing trick is getting kids to reach up. Oh, can you just reach that up there? Because they naturally open up all the back of their lungs and they breathe and they're getting some oxygen in. Passing them a glass of water with a straw in it, saying, oh, blow bubbles. Maybe they've practiced this before. They're getting some oxygen in. Just doing that yourself, it's going to be calming. Blowing up a balloon, getting kids to go outside, ride your bike, go and jump on that trampoline, getting some movement going. But that's all calming. Using the visual of just actually using this hand model and naming it like that is going to be really calming, rather than trying to use too much words. Oh, good. I've got a little question. We use calming music and breathing. Thank you. Music, right? And this is because this little group of people particularly, because of that basal ganglia part, is very calmed by movement and music. So if it's dance, do dance. If your little person is music and singing, do singing. Do listen, do play their musical instrument, but know what's calming for them, and do it even more now, right? My little pro tip: mistakes, they're like chocolate chip cookies. So chocolate chip cookies were actually invented by mistake. Back in the 1800s, lady just made it by mistake. Half of the good stuff we use, like antibiotics, all invented by mistake, okay? So you're going to make a lot of them as a parent or an educator or a professional working with these little guys. We're human. I made a mistake at 12 o'clock. But they're like chocolate chip cookies. Maybe something good might come from them, okay? That we're going to learn from them. We're going to make a lot of them. And apologies, this is my other little tip: don't force them. Do not make your child forced to make an apology, especially not those neurological rage, because it's like making someone apologize for having a seizure or for having diabetes. This is a neurological condition. Tics are a neurological condition. And we do know that children can learn days later. So come back to it. They're not those little pigeons. Come back to it. What are you wanting them to learn in that moment? Well, I want them to learn to calm. What are you wanting them to learn afterwards? I want them to learn to be a better friend or sister. So come back to it and say, you know, how can you be a better friend or sister? What can we do better? Do you think you want to do a card for your sister, or do you think you could share something with them? So come up with a better way to teach that goal rather than a forced apology, because we really know that doesn't help. So in this new world, many of us are going to be trying to parent in a time of natural disaster beyond anything we've ever seen, and educate children, and work, and have maybe partners work, and maybe you're trying to do maybe you're a therapist participating in this, you're trying to do therapy with these little guys, right? How are we going to do this if we can't get them to move around in our office? How are we going to do this? Well, actually, grab out your education support plan. Maybe you had one, maybe you were lucky enough to have one at school, or read up on some of the things that we normally do for these guys in schools. What kind of adjustments can you be doing already for your schooling? But I'm giving you full permission to fully educate these little guys differently. Do not be thinking in a time of great crisis that education is going to look the way that you might have if you decided to homeschool in a normal environment. This is not homeschool. This is parenting at home with children and schooling them from home and trying to work from home in the middle of a crisis. You do the best that you can. And it's okay to do that in a completely neurodiverse way, not a neurotypical way. So it might be that short burst works for your little guy. I've been watching a lot of webinars from the US who are a few weeks ahead of us in this, and they're really talking to Tourette's association in America was really talking about, you know, doing education 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, jumping on the trampoline and shooting Nerf bullets and saying the spelling words is absolutely an appropriate way to learn. Making environmental changes, if your little guy is going to be learning in a stationary spot, making environmental changes that should have been happening at school, but should definitely need to be. So maybe you want to watch this webinar that I've got there, that's by Therapy Connect, and I asked for their permission to share that because they're just so beautiful. I really love them. They do all their learning through online. Therapy through online, and they have a beautiful free webinar about making simple low-cost sensory tools. So wrapping elastic around the chair and twanging your feet, or doing a chair push or a wall push before, or getting a pool noodle, really cheap little things you can do at your home to get your little guy moving and be able to make some changes that's regulating for your little person, because it is about movement, right? It's a movement disorder. There's a movement that's going to be calming for them. Find out what's working. Get some free tips there. I'd love any ideas here on environmental and educational tips, because this is going to be tough. And we're going to learn from each other and we're going to share those resources, but we're not going to read from the neurotypical book. Okay, do not do that. No forward manuals here, please. So some of the other upstairs brain strategies you're going to want to do is, so remember upstairs brain, this is when we're calm and lit on. You want to think about neurodiverse rewards. So neurotypical rewards are things like sticker charts. You can't get kids to do anything with a sticker chart. I won't do anything with that. The little guys I work with, they need something a bit more exciting. So if you've got a little guy maybe who, little person who their adrenaline runs low, they're going to need something really novel, something exciting, something that constantly changes for a reward. So don't just be thinking sticker charts and plain or $1, or it's going to have to be something maybe that's engaged with something that they love. It's going to be needing to be novel and maybe even think sensory, right? Oh yeah. And someone's got a question here. I might just take a moment to ponder that while I finish this thought, because I think that's a good one. So think about neurodiverse rewards for your parenting, teaching, educating. It's going to have to be a bit different. Ask the little person. That's what neurodiversity is all about. Ask them, what would you like me to do in the middle of a meltdown? What do you want me to do in the middle of rage? What would you like for some rewards? Let's be really creative. Do that when they're lit on. The other upstairs brain strategies you're going to need to do is maybe think about therapy, okay? Think about the online free programs that are available. And I've got some beautiful online programs in this resource, and I'll be able to pop them all up on my website. You can have a look at these, okay? Because you're going to need to think differently. And maybe, you know, now is the time, rather than learning the 7 times table, maybe it's time to be learning the emotional well-being timetable, okay? And some helpful thoughts. And there's beautiful free online programs that you can set. So this question is understanding of the impact of online interactive strategy war games on tics. Okay, so playing video games that are particularly strategy, how does that impact on tics? I feel like you might know more than me there, so feel free to say if you know something. My general thoughts on gaming and tics is ask the little person, you guys notice. There does tend to be a pattern that some people will find their tics will settle when they're gaming, and some people will find their tics will flare up. Ask you guys collect the data, you guys be the experts on this, and you find it out. Get that little person to start noticing as well, because awareness training is the key part of the best program that you can do, which is CBET, that I'm going to talk to a little bit about. So actually building awareness to it, not noticing it and commenting on it and judging on it, just saying, hey, how do you find that your tics go when you're gaming? Do you find they flare up? Do they not? I suspect what your question leads to there is about the difference between types of games, and I love that. I think you're so right. Some games are really exciting. Maybe they're going to make their tics flare up. Some games are strategy and using a different part of the brain, and I reckon those ones might even calm. But I'd love your thoughts on that. I'll mark that as, you know, covered, but let me know. I'm interested in that, or if you've got research or things on that one, we'll see. Oh no, yeah, this person said they tend to settle unless they lose, and then they're triggered, and then that's when the rage comes, right? Am I right? And wondering whether it's harmful. Yes, it's the losing part, isn't it, right? So this is the stuff about awareness training and getting the little people to start noticing this as well. What is calming for you? And I do find, you know, gaming is one that, regardless of the issue, whether it's tics or anxiety or depression or ADHD, people think that it's really good for their issue and they do it, but it's actually not. It's actually a distraction, and it's actually all the tics are being suppressed, and then they come out no matter what. So it's probably sounding like you're saying no, but I think it'd be interesting to look at the different types of games as well. Another question there. Another one, son gets calming, says games make him happy and calm, but when he stops, it's all, I know you are not, those questions could have been written by anyone, right? They're really good while they're doing it for the 8 hours, but yeah, when we turn it off, it's really hard, like a spinning top. I like that. Yep. It's like a spinning top afterwards there, isn't it? Yeah. So it is about awareness about this, and especially, but this is so hard in this unusual, crazy time. What are you going to do, right? So my thoughts are, do some experiments. How did you rate your mood after playing that video game then out of 10? 10 being the best you've ever felt, 0 being the worst, right? Afterwards now, ooh, you're feeling like, what what did I say? The worst? 0? 3? You feel pretty bad now. Okay, now let's go and ride your bike, jump on the trampoline, rate your mood before and after. Oh, that's interesting. Maybe jumping on the trampoline is better for you. Maybe scooter riding is better for you. Maybe playing the guitar is better for you. I guarantee you those ones are really good, right? And the other thing is look at different types of games, because in the old world, I would say, yeah, like try to do less gaming, but try staying at home and not going anywhere. This is really hard. So even looking at different types of gaming, like the Wii Fit, a lot of families have been telling me they're being justing out the old Wii Fit and doing bowling, tennis. So it's still gaming, it's still interactive, it's still really fun, but there's a lot of movement going in, or having quick bursts of movement between the games. So every round, because often those gamings, the Fortnite or whatever they're gaming, there'll be a round, you've won, it's a battle, 10 minutes, go. Now run outside, jump on the trampoline for 10 minutes, or do 10 star jumps, or even just a quick little indoor trampoline inside that the little person can have a quick bounce on, right? I want to keep getting through, but I'm loving that you're giving me some ideas here and you're interacting. Thank you. Therapy. I just wanted to make a quick comment about this. So feel free to ask your questions about therapy, when to engage specialists and how to. My thoughts are, and the research really supports this, before engaging in evidence-based programs, particularly for the tics, it's really important to treat the comorbid conditions, because often things like ADHD get in the way from the treatment that needs to happen. So, or if you're really depressed, this needs to come as the priority. But you might find some of the things we do for all help all. So what's my number one treatment for depression is movement. What's some of the things that you can really do to help your tics is movement. So do movement, behavioral activation, activity scheduling, we call it. Every day I'm going to do this little tiny bit of movement. I'm going to rate my mood before and afterwards. I just wanted to make a little comment about Medicare and mental health plans. Keeping an eye on time because we're getting close to an hour, but I'm just going to keep talking. From my understanding, Medicare plans don't specifically mention tics and Tourette's. So if that's the only thing that's on a referral to a psychologist or social worker or occupational therapist, mental health occupational therapist, to work with a young person, you might not be eligible. But of course, the things that are eligible are the co-occurring conditions like anxiety and depression, ADHD, all of those things, okay? So it might be worth having a talk to your GP about whether a mental health plan is suitable and finding a referral to somebody who really gets this stuff. Medicare is a changing feast at the moment, and any of the psychologists who are participating in the webinar today, I know will be going, oh yeah, right? Like we've had about 10 different changes in a matter of days. So I won't speak too specifically on the Medicare, but it's worth contacting, because at some points through this COVID crisis, children have legislation is looking at all having to be bulk billed, so no out-of-pocket costs for getting a mental health plan for a child to see a psychologist. So that might change on a minute-by-minute basis. I don't know, but it might be something to think about if you have looked at a mental health plan. So I'm very cautiously putting it out there because I know it's an interesting one. But let me tell you about what the evidence-based intervention is for tics and Tourette's. So I find in America and the UK particularly, they have just rolled this out. All the specialists and psychologists and OTs, they all get training in CBIT, which is the evidence-based intervention for this in Australia. It's still emerging. So I've been trained in CBIT, and it's the comprehensive behaviour intervention for tics. And it's a whole program that helps little people and adults to respond to their tics and to stop them. Not suppress them, not hold them in, because you can't hold them in. They will always come out. Kids will sit there at school and hold in their tics all day long, and at 3 o'clock they all come out. So it doesn't teach them to suppress. It's actually really quite different. It actually changes that brain pathway, that neurological loop that I was telling you about, and it actually stops the junk mail coming. It's got really good evidence. It's very effective, but it requires a lot of work, a lot of attention and focus, right? And somebody who's trained in it and really gets it. But there are people who are, and that's part of why I wanted to do this webinar, was to get word out to go, come on, other psychologists and mental health practitioners, OT, there's all training available for these guys to do this now. So you can do it, and there's beautiful resources and books and online training, and it is available, and it's really like I don't want to use the word easy, but it's something that's easily learned by me. And I think it's very enjoyable and very satisfying. So I need more people to be asking for it, and I need more people to know that they should go off and do that training. Now, how are you going to do that when you can't leave the house? Because this is all body stuff. This, I'm going to need to look at your neck, and I'm going to need to, you know, if you've got a neck tick, I need to look at your neck and help you to learn a competing response, or I need to talk to parents and explain to them to not do all those reinforcing things like say, stop it after every time they cough, right? Which they don't do, because it's really hard not to do that. Don't comment on it. So we do a whole environmental program. We do a whole program with the person who wants to change their tics to change them. How do I do that if I can't leave the house? Well, guess what? There's this thing called Tele-CBIT, right? Boom. Okay, so just like you're connecting with me now, we can do it through the video conferencing. It's very effective. There is free training from the Tourette's for professionals, for psychologists, on how to do that. And I'm going to have that link available on my website, and just share the heck out of that, because I want everybody to know that. The webinar I watched, the psychologist who was doing the training said, 2 weeks ago, I would have told you this could not be done. You can't, and she'd done CBIT all her life, training it, delivering it. She said, 2 weeks ago, I would have told you you can't do CBIT through telehealth, through a camera and a computer sitting in someone's home. And she said, now it's all I'm doing, all I do. It can be done. I've been doing it for years with other young people through the video, and it's actually really useful because you can actually really get up close and see the muscle movement and go, right, can you just tilt your screen down and have a look, right? So it's definitely able to be done. So I'm really keen for more people to get that information out there. So if you are a person who's wanting this for your little person, you can share some of those resources with your professionals who are already engaged. Or if you're a practitioner, you're going to be able to access all of that free training and get in and do it. I just want to make special comment here about, you know, who are the other experts you might want to involve. I can't believe it, because I was so just straight in and excited to see you. I didn't even go, I'm Barb, I'm a psychologist. I'm a clinical psychologist and child psychologist. But so what does psychologists do? We're experts in behaviour. So that's, of course, why I've got a great role in working in tics and Tourette's. If you need an expert in communication, that's a speech therapist. And because of a lot of these comorbid conditions that come along, you may well need that. So maybe it's even just social skills a bit tricky. You might need a speech therapist. People often don't realise that. Or if you have a vocal tic, speech therapists who are knowledgeable in this area are going to be the ones to help. If you have a coughing or a swallowing tic, these are going to be the people who might want to help. If you have an issue with your occupation, an occupational therapist is who's helpful. So a child's occupation is to go to school, to sit still, to be calm, to go to the toilet, have a shower. These are all things that occupational therapists help with. So of course, an occupational therapist is going to be helpful with tics and Tourette's as well. I find them particularly helpful because I feel like they really understand the muscle movements and the competing responses that we've got to come up with to train that new brain pathway. So they really understand the use of body. If you have needing support with medical, of course, your GP is always your starting point, but a pediatrician or psychiatrist is going to be your expert there. These are all my resources there for you. And I've got some resources there for professionals, all those free trainings. So if you are a professional, get on and do them. If you're wanting to share that with your professionals so they can be aware, get on and do them. I reckon we're at the last bit of questions. I can't believe how well I timed that. It's right on an hour. But I would love to take any other questions that I haven't had a chance to respond to, or things that you were wanting to know. I do know, while you think of it, because it takes a little minute laggy-wise to come through. So last chance for questions, people. But not really ever last chance. Just email me, get on Facebook, send me a message. It's fine. Follow my YouTube channel, like and subscribe. One of the questions I didn't get to was developmental stages. So absolutely, we know, because we know, remember I was talking about those neurotransmitters, the brain chemicals, they change at adolescence. So of course, tics and Tourette's changes at adolescence, right, and puberty. But also what we know is that the brain does change and develop, and we do find that a lot of people will stop having their tics or Tourette syndrome diagnosis, will no longer meet that criteria by the time of adulthood, even sometimes around 16. The majority of people grow out of it, is the right word, but some people do not. So it is definitely a lifelong condition for some people, and it can affect people across the lifespan. But it is definitely developmentally something to look at. So this is why we find people often contact me at a flare up at around 11 or 12, and then it starts to kind of come down by a bit older. How many sessions are usually done with CBIRT? I mean, that's like saying, you know, how long's a piece of string? It depends on it depends on what your kind of tics are, and how the age of the person, and how you make progress. But I've seen some people have beautiful response after a single session. So particularly adults who are really motivated and really engaged and very quick to learn the program and go, they learn the model really quickly. They now know that they'll do it with one tic. They'll be able to change their tic. They stop that tic happening, and then they know how to use that model for other ones that come along, or maybe they really just wanted to get rid of that one. But it's really about understanding that. But some people certainly need more. It really depends on the type of tics and how you connect with it. So it's not like a particular week number program. One of the things I've popped in here, I'm just going to go back, is here is Tic Helper, an app that you can buy for about $50, and it's written, it's developed, but I was going to get my book to show you. It's developed by Douglas Woods, who's the creator of the CBIRT program and the book that we buy and the manual. And so, you know, another way of answering the question about, you know, how many sessions or how long is buy that app, do it, work through it, right? But what you'll likely find is that with the waxing and waning, you might come back to it. So you go like, oh, I've worked on that tic for an hour. It's really settled. I'm feeling pretty comfortable. Now I have a new flare up of another one that's just causing me discomfort. And that's how we decide which ones to work on, is which is causing you discomfort. Because I'm not about changing with that neurodiversity model. I'm not about saying you must be a round peg and fit into a round hole. It's bothering you. If it's an eye twitch and you don't even notice it, and it's just that somebody's noticing it, don't work on it. But if it's something that the client or the participant would like to work on and you'd like some support in, that's how. So it's how long would you like to? How long are you getting benefit from that? Oh, beautiful question there. What about stuttering as a form of tic? That is so true. So yes, absolutely, stuttering can be a form of tic. And again, how do you know, right? So engaging your experts. I feel it's a bit weird to look at my own face, so I'm going to go like this. I'm going to stop sharing. Now I've got to get my thoughts, because now I'm still just looking at my own face and even bigger now. Stuttering can be a tic. How do you know? Engage your experts. Ask the person who's doing it. Have they always stuttered before this? And yes, they do have tics. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's just actually stuttering. But if they haven't stuttered, they do have tics, and then they have an onset of stuttering, it's most likely a tic. And yes, that could be something that's really worth working on, or even just naming and identifying as a tic and reminding those in the environment. Do not comment on it. Do not say, oh, you're doing your thing again, or stop coughing, or stop stuttering. Don't be doing that, because that's actually going to reinforce it. That's one of my biggest tips for tics, is do not reinforce it by talking about it. Actually, and that's why sometimes though people with tics and Tourette's will go to a specialist, a pediatrician or a psychiatrist, and the advice they'll get is, oh, just nothing, just ignore it. But that doesn't, like, it's true, ignore it, don't make it worse, but that actually leaves the person still experiencing sometimes what are very painful tics. So the next thing to let them know is that you can also do CBIRT. You can do a whole range of activities to support them. Oh, look, and somebody's saying thank you. It's been really helpful. I'm so glad to get that feedback. Please do let me know. Another question here. How do you differentiate between neurological rage in Tourette's and intermittent explosive disorder? Whew, that's a hard one. I reckon... and I like that you can't see the other people's messages. Somebody said a little while ago that you can't see the messages. That's good. I don't want you to, because it's all private. It's a really hard question. It would be something that would be worth talking about with your particular specialist and the people in your team. My off-the-cuff general thoughts would be, if your little person has tics, then it's neurological rage through the tic disorder. Okay, it's neurological rage rather than a separate condition. And that's why you got to see it as that tics being the tip of the iceberg. This is really likely. Would it mean you'd respond any differently? Does it matter? Maybe. But talk about it with your professionals. I think I've answered all the questions, but I'm just going to scroll through. Stuttering. There was a thank you there. Very exciting. This is your last chance to ask any questions. I love that the number has stayed pretty much the same. So you've all stayed with me. Somehow you've found some peace in this very difficult time. And I hope that it's been, oh, another thank you. Thank you. I hope that it's been useful. I wanted to resource you up. I do feel like I could just keep talking and giving you brainstorming on how to get through this, but I think it's going to be a massive range of things that we're all going to need to do, and hopefully this has been a little piece of it and some thoughts for you. But importantly, you can re-watch this because I have actually given you a lot of information. So even that one slide where I was like, do environmental changes, name entertainment, that's key. This is the big stuff. So there's lots of resources there for you and lots of things to come along with. Another thank you. And it is going to be a difficult time. It is really. And I suppose the best thing that we can do is have some compassion for ourselves. And that's why when I made a little mistake about the timing, I just went, I'll have some compassion with myself, because this is a time that no one has ever tried to run a webinar in a time of crisis on tics and Tourette's, and and done the many things that we've all had to do in a matter of weeks, in a matter of fast-paced timing. So take that compassion and apply it to yourself, apply it to the little people that you're dealing with, because this is a very challenging time. But go back to the self-care, do the physical activity, do the music, do the breathing. Time to ask for some help. It's okay to be singing out from your support team, and if you don't have one, now is the time to get it. And I will hope that it's being a little bit reassuring that you can do all of these things through video, right? I and many of the psychologists in Australia have switched entirely to telehealth through video, and I find it really beautiful because I get to go to people's homes and I get to see their cats and their dogs and meet their siblings, and see where they can practice these calming strategies in their own environment. So it's going to be challenging, but we will adapt, and we will, what do they say? Necessity is the mother of all inventions. We've all had to be pretty flexible. We will get there. I hope this has been useful. I will sign off. And do sing out. Let me know if you have any questions at all. And I look forward to your feedback, and keep following maybe a Facebook page and things too, because there's lots and lots of information. I do enjoy sharing it. There's so much to share there. All right, guys, I will sign off then. I think I've been doing a range of goodbyes, so maybe I won't do my Vulcan sign off like I've done lately. I'll do my may the force be with you, because I feel like that's appropriate in this very unusual time. All right, see you.